Welcome back to Autoblog Live here at the Detroit Auto Show. So day 2 is coming to an end, the second press day at the North American International Auto Show. And we're going to wrap things up with a roundtable. I'm joined by Autoblog senior editors Greg Migliori and Alex Kirstein.
All right.
All right, guys. So day 2 is typically a pretty slow day at Detroit. In years past, we've seen we've seen stuff that's already revealed, or not a lot of people are paying attention. But we've got Acura and Lincoln, 2 fairly big announcements. Do you think day 2 is back? We'll see more of this next year.
I think so. I mean, for one thing, just practically having 2 days like this to spread things out makes a lot of sense for the writers, for the journalists. And, having 2 things like the Continental big deal reveal kind of anchored it. There's a reason to stick around for that.
Yeah, it's nice. Day 1 is so busy. It's nice to be able to have an opportunity to catch a few things without all the clutter of all the other reveals. I mean, It was kind of this Acura concept. I mean, I think it's worth evaluating on its own and not having it get lost in a sea of other things, or try and compare it directly to the LC500. Having some of these things happen on their own day lets you kind of take a minute and actually think about what you're seeing instead of running around.
All right, so let's talk more about that Acura. I mean, I thought it was pretty. I haven't had a chance to go see it in person, but at least they're doing something, which is a far cry from their current showroom offerings. What did you guys think of it?
I think, for one thing, it makes a design statement for them. I'm not sure I really like it, to be honest. I think it's a little too extreme, but they took some risks, and I really applaud any company that says, hey, we're going to do a crazy design, look at us.
Yeah, I'm sort of in agreement. I don't know that I think it works for me as a whole, but I think, a lot of times the purpose of these is to push the company and the people that are looking on sort of out of their comfort zone and say, hey, we're about to go in a different direction. We're about to evolve things sort of beyond where you want them to be. And it shows where they're going.
So what's the bad part for you? What's the ugly?
I just thought it was a little too extreme. Like, to me, this doesn't look like any Acura on the road, like, at all. I just feel like they kind of broke from any sort of design language they have going on. But it's also a really big car. It seemed a little awkward to me.
It is big. It's about the size of a BMW 7 Series, which to me was, they're making it a caricature. But you're right. They have the NSX, I think, is the best showcase of that old design language they have, and it's just coming out. And then they're kind of saying, scrap that, new direction.
I thought it looked like a Mazda a little bit too.
There was a little Mazda.
There was a little RX-8 in the profile.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the Continental. Good. We saw the concept last year at New York in April, and here we are 8 months later with the production car. Did they follow through?
400 horsepower, twin turbo V6, all-wheel drive. Those are some pretty good production cred, I think. It looks elegant. It's what I expected.
I think a few of the details that I really liked about the concept kind of got lost in the execution. I mean, that's to be expected, but we've seen at this show, like the LC500, which looks like a concept. It looks better than the concept car.
Yeah.
So it doesn't seem like we're in a universe where you need to water down the concept anymore. So I'm a little disappointed that Lincoln felt the need to, in the transition to the production, lose some of the cool details. I'm a little disappointed.
All right.
A little disappointed.
I like it. I like the direction they're going, but I also just came back from CES. So I'm a little bit trapped in the future here. And a big picture question, for a company like Lincoln that wants to grow their brand, they're resurgent, they're making a comeback, is it a good idea for them to go into a traditional luxury segment, or do you think they should have gone like way off the map, like BMW iCars? I mean, it's more for any automaker, not specifically Lincoln. I'm not dogging them, but.
Well, I think this is a safe play for them. They're using an existing Ford Motor Company chassis. They're dipping into a lot of, the oily bits, things that are really proven. And I think, this is sort of like the first of a number of new waves of Lincolns coming. There's 2 more that we don't really know about. This is just step 1, and I think it's a smart play.
I think it's a little bit too safe. I mean,
too safe?
I think the expected thing for Lincoln to do is to take an existing Ford platform and make some changes to it and sell it as a Lincoln. And the problem is the company that division has tried to reinvent itself. And I think to really do that, they need to break the mold a bit. I mean, maybe that has to be still built on Ford platforms, but we've seen in other car companies how wildly divergent 2 vehicles can be built on the same platform. And I don't know.
But I mean, giving Lincoln credit, this is the furthest they've gone from that old thing of rebadged Fords. They have an engine that's still exclusive to Lincoln.
Yeah.
The all-wheel drive torque vectoring rear differential is so far only going to be in the Focus RS, or is it going to be in the Fusion? Anyway,
Focus
okay.
RS. Yep.
Yeah, Focus, and it's all different sheet metal. It's all different interior. They're making different cars right now. They're not making Fords with Lincoln grills.
I actually think
Fair
the
enough.
Lincoln lineup right now is in pretty good shape. It's understated, but I drove the MKC. I liked it. I even told my wife, I was like, this is kind of a cool little crossover. And she was like, well, I don't think I need a Lincoln.
Right.
But MKX looks pretty solid. And Continental, bringing that name back, I think that's definitely a step in the right direction.
I agree completely. I can't stress enough how great it is to see a name back, in
really
an
good
electric
name.
vehicle. Because the MK other letter formula, it doesn't have a lot of charisma. And the name Continental has a ton of charisma, and I think it's a great move. And the other thing I have to say is, we've got a couple different opinions about whether it's the right direction or not. I mean, really the proof is going to be how it drives, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
With that new torque vectoring all-wheel drive system and the new engine, I mean, if the driving dynamic is so much different than the Ford it's based on, then it'll be a different story when we drive it, I think.
Yeah, and that's kind of every auto show. We see the cars, and for us, I think for the viewers or for people that go visit it on the public days, it's super exciting because they're cars you don't get to see it. We get a little fatigued, and we say, oh, man, all right, well, we've seen stuff like this before, and it fell flat. What's it going to drive like? We have to wait. But going back to rebadged cars, let's move on to GMC with the Acadia.
Good segue.
This is a brand that is essentially Chevy trucks with a different grille, but they're selling a ton of them. They're making a ton of money. They have the Denali lineup, which just adds more fuel to the giant cash furnace that GMC is making. What do you guys think of that?
I liked it. I'm a meat and potatoes guy. I mean, give me
So
I would take
true.
the Denali, give me the chrome, it's totally. I think it looked pretty good. I liked how they cleaned up the design a little bit. It's a little more of a sophisticated look for 2016. They got away from it was almost a little cartoonish vehicle. Some of the GMCs are. And I thought it looked pretty good. And it's 700 pounds lighter. That's pretty big.
Great styling, I think, on the vehicle. And I like that they downsized it slightly. I think that's a tough thing to do with a three-row crossover is to downsize it. And it lost a lot of weight.
Yeah.
That's going to help on the fuel economy front. And I think, it was an aging platform. It really needed to be revitalized. And I think making it a little leaner and making it look a lot crisper, newer.
Sure.
I think it's a huge win. We can't ignore large crossovers. I mean, they're selling really well. And I think it's a pretty strong play to have it launch as a GMC, to be honest with you.
I like, too, that they're actually, I think, giving the Acadia a little more identity because the old one was like 4,600 pounds was the base curb weight. That's a big vehicle. And GMC still sells the Yukon and the Yukon XL. I think it's okay to kind of dial back the Acadia. It's still a three-row crossover, still plenty capable, but, make it a little more contemporary, a little bit lighter, a little bit slimmer.
All right.
And I don't think anyone's going to miss the capabilities have been reduced. I mean, towing capacity went down a little bit, but like you said, there are plenty of other vehicles. You get a larger GMC, a real truck-based vehicle, body on frame, and you get that towing back. So, I think it's bringing it more in line with what the customers want.
Yeah, I agree, and I think too, it's you can still. Everything you could do with the old Acadia, you can pretty much do with this one. You can still tow the boat. You can still put the chocolate lab and two kids in it. So I think they know their market.
All right, and so last big item today, and this was a typical. We're talking about how the changes in day 2 came this year. This is an old kind of day 2 where they had a press conference, but they already had the car on the stand, and it wasn't really anything that anyone would show up to. But still pretty interesting is the Titan Warrior concept, which is this. It's a Nissan Titan with, rugged Tonka truck-like styling.
I love this concept.
Right.
I love it. I think the only problem with seeing the Warrior concept is that I wish they'd launched that styling on the production the Titan XD because it looks so good. And it maybe is a little derivative of SVT Raptor styling cues and concept. I mean, but it looks awesome. It's butch as heck. I think it's I think Nissan would be smart to make something like that available at a mid-cycle refresh, mild restyle, and have those parts available, as Nismo parts or something.
Yeah, it's a really smart play, I think. Like I said, I'm a meat and potatoes guy. This is meat and potatoes with like béarnaise sauce. I love it. It's a little cartoony, but they do these things to get a reaction, to get us talking about them, and this is absolutely something I think they should consider.
All right, so main show, bunch of cars. Let's go with top. What's your favorite overall?
Ooh.
Personal favorite.
That's easy. I just got off the show floor. I looked at the Lexus LC500 again, and I mean, that pushes all my buttons. I know I talked about it a little bit already. I think the proportions are wonderful, and I think the fact that I just can't remember the last time I saw a production-ready vehicle that looked better than the concept in my mind. So I'm swooning about that one personally.
I'm
really
with you right there. It's really good timing. I just sat in that car. We shot a video inside.
Oh, okay.
Inside is gorgeous. All the materials feel really nice. It's still a little not final build, obviously, but really nice layout, very driver focused, but also very luxurious. It's exactly like a Lexus. I think it's the image they want to convey.
So let's talk about that interior, because like you said, it has beautiful materials, but they also moved some stuff around from where Lexus is now. Like the drive mode select is up on the instrument binnacle. What else is going on there that you saw and that you liked?
I thought they cleaned it up a little bit too. Like some of the Lexuses right now, like the Lexi with that like mouse thing going on, that would not fit in this thing. This is a sports car, and it's like basically like everything the driver would touch or interact with is right in front of them. There's not really too many like superfluous knobs or buttons on the side, and the infotainment system is really kept to a minimum. Like the screen's pretty small. There's real buttons, which I think is great. And it's a chic look that's kind of sporty.
All right, I hate to go unanimous on this, but Alex, you kind of swayed me. I think the minivan is pretty important. I'm a big fan of it. I think it looks good, but I mean, if I had to pick best in show, I guess I'd probably go with that LC too.
But I mean, we shouldn't. I think you're right to point out just how important that Pacifica minivan is. I mean, that was a huge debut. It's a huge vehicle, and I think it's really important.
I love that they went. They didn't just say, "Hey, this is the next iteration. We clean things up." They went all out, like saying, "We're not just going to make it better than the current Honda, the current Toyota. We're gonna push it so that those guys have to go back to the drawing board and come up with a bunch of new stuff." I love that they took the vacuum in. We said this yesterday. They weren't too proud to copy, and I think they actually did a better integration of the vacuum because it's in the center of the minivan and the hose is right there, so you can basically use it any time. Like it's just this example where, whoever's working on that team spends every waking hour thinking about minivans.
I think it's really a smart move for them because, remember, they invented the segment. And what they did is they took it's a cliche, but they threw out the book and just looked at how could we do this better for 2017. And I think all those features you mentioned, plus the fact they were gutsy enough to go with the Pacifica name, that just signals change to me.
For me, that's the one outside thing. You threw away Town and Country, you threw away Caravan. We'll see how much. Do you think people are going to still know that that's the minivan?
So here's the thing. I think it's a gutsy move. I actually don't think it's the right move.
Okay.
So
I don't know. I feel like Town and Country is sort of it's an old name that's sort of pregnant with, old connotations, and I'm not sure that I would have used the Pacifica name had I been making that marketing decision, but I'm sure a focus group somewhere approved it. But, I think ditching the old name, not the worst thing in the world. Maybe a more interesting new name might have been better because the Pacifica was sort of a forgettable crossover.
Sure.
All right. Any other big highlights for you guys?
I thought the Buick Avista looked pretty good. That might be my favorite vehicle. I just like the idea that Buick is dabbling with performance. I thought the design really came off well.
All right. I'm going to disagree with you on this because, first of all, I don't think they're going to build it. Last year they showed us a large rear-wheel drive luxury car. It's on an existing GM platform. They could make it. Not going to get made. This time they showed us like an ATS Camaro-ish kind of thing. I don't think they're going to make it. And frankly, I don't think they need to because Buick right now is making that quiet, comfortable car, the Lexus space, for lack of a better word, while Cadillac is going more sporty. And I feel like Buick can do a really good job of that, and they're doing a good job of it. So, yeah. I mean, Why do they need a sports car?
Well, I think they don't need a sports car. They need us to be talking about it. That's why they're doing it.
Fair enough.
Because right now the Regal and the LaCrosse is kind of like spooling up. Those cars aren't here yet. So you can't do the 2016 Detroit Auto Show and not talk about Buick in their mind. Let's throw out this Camaro-like concept, gets us talking about it, and oh wait, the new Regal comes in 8 months.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not really sure if they should build it or not. I think if they build it, they won't be able to sell it. I just don't think that's – I mean, the ATS is having trouble selling as it is. It's a tough segment to compete in. But do they need a Halo car? I kind of think Buick does. And does a concept car that won't go into production, does that bring enough attention and cachet to the brand to do what they need to do with it? Maybe. So I don't know. I think it could go either way. I kind of hope they do build it because I always like to see automakers taking a chance, and that would be a big chance. So let's hope they I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think they should do it if they have the possibility to?
I like taking chances. For automakers it's tough because there's so much money involved and the cost of failure is so high. But that creates this problem in our industry where everyone's conservative, everyone's copying everyone else, and then we get this whole horde of bland mid-size SUVs that are selling like hotcakes, but to me have no emotional interest whatsoever.
See, I don't think this is a big risk. I think for Buick, it's a bit of a risk. For General Motors, they're making money right now. They're positioned where they need to be. They have some money to put into Buick and say, okay, we're going to give you this platform. It's proven. Do this with it. And if it doesn't work, okay, it's the modern-day Pontiac Solstice.
Right. Well, but going back to, like I said, I'm no fan of crossovers, but they're the fastest growing segment. Every segment of crossover is one of the fastest growing, and it's overtaking sedans. Again, should you be showing a Halo sports car, or is it time to say the world's moved on? We just got to go to the volume. Where are more Buick crossovers?
That's an interesting point. I mean, I'm not sure. Can you have a Halo crossover? I mean, is that a thing? I mean, Cadillac has the Escalade, but it's different, and I think this is tough, and I think automakers need to figure this out because you're right. We live in a crossover-dominant world, and the two-seat sort of personal luxury sports car is kind of an archaic concept that was sort of moving away from. I mean, look at Mercedes with the SL. That's sort of, I think, it's still a great vehicle, but kind of an old idea of what a Halo vehicle should be. So for the Avista, is it an old way to think about Halo cars? I don't know.
I mean, in a Halo sense, though, you mentioned Mercedes. If you think about the S-Class Coupe, that is sort of this pinnacle of, personal luxury. And so, no, I don't think the volume's there as a marketing play or as a market play or to make money. It's not a good idea. But in terms of Mercedes has the standard, and this is the Mercedes that if you just want luxury and you want to drive, this is it. I mean, look at Lexus. They're doing the same thing with the LC. They're saying, this is our Halo. Mm-hmm. I still think that as much as we are in a crossover world, there's an emotional draw to the car, and people still know that. Problem is they don't buy it.
They did show a crossover. That's the other side about doing these flashy Halo cars is they did show the Buick Envision in production trim, and we're not even talking about it. So there's that. And honestly, I was a little underwhelmed by that vehicle. I like the Encore a little bit more. I like the Enclave a little bit more. I saw the Envision and was like, well, that's kind of nice. It's the right size. It's like, to your point, it's exactly what the market's asking for, but I don't know.
All right, so we're all in agreement. Board on SUVs.
Charge.
Let's move a little bit inside the auto show. So our show here this week was to bring people inside, see the press conferences, get an idea of what press days are like. What did you guys like walking out on the show floor in terms of booths and presentations? Cars people have on the stands that's not just concepts.
So the Ford stand's pretty cool. I was just walking around the show, finally getting a feel for it. It's like a very layered display. Like, you got to go all the way back. You get in there, it kind of welcomes you. You want to spend some time. And with Lincoln sort of having its own display now, there's more room for, like, the performance stuff. So
and they got that escalator built into the stand.
To go there, that's where you have to go to see the GT.
Okay.
So
that'll be a giant line on public days.
If you want to see the GT, take the escalator.
So I kind of like seeing the Genesis stand, and not because it was a super interesting display. It was pretty simple. In fact, it looked a lot like some of the British stands, which are kind of minimalist. But it's just sort of neat to see a new mark, like a new brand have a newsstand, and it's just exciting. I mean, that doesn't happen that often in this industry, to get an entirely new subdivision or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, and again, talking about risk and talking about automakers going places, I think the Genesis is a good move. I'm glad they're doing it. The car's handsome. It's kind of like everything else, or the earlier Genesises. They did a good job of making it inoffensive, which is kind of the perfect luxury car, at least, if you're playing the volume. So I like that too.
Yeah, I think too it's a good move for them to, even though it's near the Hyundai stand, I think it's good for them to create that own identity. And it's cool to see new brands. To your point, it's like, I think right now we're like how the industry was 110 years ago, with all these new brands, all these new technologies, and it's crazy. It's like a whole new like the day after tomorrow. The day after the apocalypse, which in many ways, it is.
We're back to having real powertrain competition.
Well,
I mean, there's Bolt now. I mean, that's a mass market EV, 200 miles range. It's going to sell for something like $30,000 after incentives. That's huge. That's almost like going back to it's Detroit Electric versus the Curve Dash Olds or something at the beginning of the century.
Nice.
When either one could have kind of
Nice
pulled
pull.
forward, and it was some market things and technological things where gas motors won out. But what's on the road in 20 years? We're seeing different things now.
Yeah, well, and to your point, Greg, with like the financial apocalypse was 2008. It takes 4 to 6 years to make a car, so we're in the first full cycle after the financial apocalypse, and I think the stuff we're seeing is pretty great. I have one thing I want to talk about, because I just came back from CES. I've been saying this over and over, and Audi took the demonstration display they had at press days for CES and brought it to the show here, and it's a little dashboard mock. They're saying it's pretty close to what we're going to see with the new A8, but it has their new MMI, which doesn't have a control knob. It's 3 screens, an instrument cluster screen, a main nav screen, and then an input screen on the bottom with climate control. And I hate touchpads. I'm like the #1 hater on it. And this is the first one I've been telling everyone, you got to go by the Audi stand. You got to try this out, because it's haptic feedback. You push the screen, and it pushes back, and it clicks like a button. And I think they did a great job for 2 reasons. One, the feedback is perfect. It actually does click. And also, you can drag your finger over the screen without activating anything. So you can do that sort of like feeling around home thing where you don't have to use your whole glance. You can keep some of your eyes on the road. And I made a video at CES, and we had some of the comments were like, "Oh, there's too much glare." It's like, well, it's too much glare because we're under the show stand. But the best one was, touchscreens will never work. It's like, my video is telling you that this one works. It feels like buttons. Have you guys tried that out?
I know, but that's what I'm going to do next. I'm pretty psyched about that.
Yeah, I'm super excited about going and trying that, because the whole touchscreen thing is interesting. I mean, I don't want to sound like a Luddite, but sometimes I like a real physical button.
Yes.
Something where, without looking down at what you're doing, you can tell what button you're pushing.
Sure.
And I think a lot of touchscreens now that don't have haptic feedback, you have to pay attention to what you're pushing, and I think that can be more distracting than the alternative. So
yes,
seeing a
absolutely.
technology that takes that distraction factor out of the mix and makes it something that is, gives a real benefit to the driver, that is where that tech should be and where it should be going.
So the interesting thing out of CES was Audi and Volkswagen were both saying, in their customer focus, the thing that their customers are looking for is a universal experience. So they're used to touchpads now, and they want to see the touchpad experience in their screen, which is basically automakers saying, we're going to move away from knobs and buttons because the whole world is moving away from knobs and buttons. I think the trick is making it work. But I was fascinated by that because, I think all of us prefer buttons.
Yeah.
And it's kind of saying, well, look, it's time to get with the times.
Well,
it's all
yeah.
touchscreen.
It's one of those things, too, where I feel like, and probably with Alex, too, you're dragging me kicking and screaming. I want my buttons. I don't even want, small buttons. I want the big, I want doorknobs in my car. But
do you want the old, slider HVAC controls?
I do, actually.
Yeah, because those had, very, feedback. You knew exactly where that knob was on the range. So I don't know. I mean, I feel like
what we need actually is a tablet with slider controls and buttons on the tablet.
There you go.
Like magnetic that you can stick out. Hey, that's not a bad idea. You just put your button on the screen and move it around however you want. So the one thing I think is interesting about this is I feel like automakers used to say, this is where you're going to go. they used to kind of guide consumers to a new feature. And lately, we've been getting away from that, and it's sort of been driven by consumer preferences based on focus groups. Touchscreens are the one thing where they're saying that's where we're going, get used to it. Like, it's their job to make it work, but it's interesting that consumers aren't being coddled. And if the we can put up a little resistance, but that really is where we're going. And it's nice that the automakers are not shying away from that important transition. They're pulling us into the future. It's kind of neat.
Well, so let's bring that back to the show and the Chevy Bolt. Did you guys look inside that?
Yeah,
it's got a big, fully digital display, but I think they did a great job. It's got some rounded edges. It looks a little bit like old instrument cluster, and then it has the biggest screen in any GM car for the center screen.
It's very sophisticated, very futuristic. This is actually one of the cars I think I'm most excited about. It's coming out, I believe, late this year, right?
Yeah, I think so.
So $30,000, 200 miles on a single charge. That's awesome. I would recommend that to so many different people. And then when you get that sort of like futuristic, but also kind of dialed in interior, that's a win.
Yeah, I like that car a lot. I think it's a really solid execution. Based on the Spark, it's going to drive really well, and that interior is cool. It's got the textured plastic on it. Kind of feels like a 3D printed surface, which is exactly the impression they should be giving.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where they need to go. Things like the i3, where, I mean,
I love the
I know
i3.
you love the i3, but the inside's a little too esoteric, I think, for most people. And with the Bolt, I think they got the right mix. So I think it's I'm interested to see how the marketplace responds to it, because it's a really fascinating. It's going to be a fascinating experiment in terms of sales to the American public. I can't wait to see it.
All right. Well, yeah. Real quick, let's touch on the Germans, because we haven't talked about them a lot. Usually, the Germans kind of dominate auto shows. It's their thing. They have the expensive models that everyone likes. Quiet year, production year. What do you guys? Why are we talking about them?
I think in some ways you're seeing a little bit of that diesel hangover from Volkswagen, because they usually have a really big presence here. This year there was the Tiguan GTE Active concept, which is actually how the Tiguan's going to look, but it's still a Tiguan. BMW M2. That was cool.
It was also kind of expected, and I mean, I think to your point about the TDI scandal, I mean, it's I understand they have to apologize and they have to own up to it, but every press conference starts out with them addressing it, and it's just tough. It's like we're in a hangover is a good word for it, but I think the Tiguan concept looked really good.
Yeah.
I was really surprised to see the H-Tron. I mean, I know Audi has invested a ton of money in developing hydrogen fuel cells, but that still seems like kind of a pipe dream to me. And
I thought that too.
It seems like sort of a weird side thing. I mean, they're also working on EV technology and on autonomous driving, and that seems much more near future. So, I don't know. The H-Tron didn't really do it for me.
All right. So, final question. Quick round. Final grade for the Detroit Auto Show this year.
I'd say A-. Last year would have been like a solid A. This year, A-.
I think A-. I'm going to agree. I think there was some stuff I really like seeing. I love being able to see it in person. Generated a lot of excitement. The readers of the site loved a lot of the things, but it wasn't like when we saw the Ford GT for the first time. Yeah. So there was no real wow moment, but there was a lot of really solid stuff.
All right, I'll go with you guys. Solid A-. And that's all we've got today for our wrap-up show. We're going to be right back with Jesse, Jonathan, and Patrick to sign off from our broadcast. Thanks again for watching. And for Autoblog, I'm Mike Austin.